Zoological parks, more widely referred to as zoos, are places where animals are kept in captivity and displayed to the public to view. The first zoo was actually created in 1793 and still stands today in Paris, France. Zoos are now all over the world, with as many as 700 million people visiting them each year, and they are very popular in society today as a source of both education and entertainment. The Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or the AZA, is actually an organization that is dedicated to the advancement of zoos and aquariums in areas such as conservation, recreation, education, science, other aspects as well. With the many challenges that species face in today's changing world, the AZA upholds the use of zoos as an aid in preserving wildlife. Although zoos now serve as captivating facilities to educate the public, conduct research on animals, and promote species conservation, there is a highly controversial debate present concerning the validity and the humanity of zoos. This debate poses the question, should zoos be used as a valid method of conservation of species? This question is important to discuss because zoos are such a popular source of entertainment in society, but the truth behind them is rarely discussed. Animals are losing their lives, losing their habitats, or maybe even both, and zoos may be a way to help these animals while restoring biodiversity as a whole. Because zoos save animals from extinction and provide them with a sanctuary when needed, they should be upheld as a necessary method of conservation of species. Some of the world's most precious animals are in danger of losing their lives, classifying them as endangered species, or species whose population has declined to the point where the survival is peril. According to the World Wildlife Fund's Living Planet report from 2018, there has been a 60% decline in species and the population of many species all over the world in just about 40 years. AZA accredited zoos participate in conservation efforts with the hopes of reviving these species and reintroducing them back into the wild. They conduct research on methods to protect the species, they promote conservation awareness, and they even raise critical funds when necessary. Zoo conservation efforts have actually already achieved the revival of many endangered species. A few examples are the giant panda, the gray whale, and the peregrine falcon. What zoos do is they enable species like these who were once on the verge of extinction to be successfully rescued from their potential non-existence. The problem that occurs deals with the captivity and the coercion within the zoos. In zoos, animals are confined to a strict and a captive lifestyle in which they become vulnerable to manipulation and torture, leading to many incidents of animal cruelty in zoos. In April of 2018, in the Fiji Zoo in China, a kangaroo was hurt by visitors who were throwing rocks at the animal, and the kangaroo died the next day. Another incident is that of a bear at the Toledo Zoo in Ohio. Here, this bear was locked up to hibernate without any food or water. Not knowing that the bear species does not hibernate, the zoo officials evidently starved the animal to death. Innocent animals are being harmed when they're supposed to be being saved. Now, a primary reason behind extinction deals with habitat loss, and the human race is constantly impacting the environment, destroying species' habitats and leaving them with no place to go. And it's evident that an increase in the urban population leads to an increase in urban development, further destroying species' habitats. Mark Montgomery, a population researcher, states that the urban population in the developing world is expected to grow substantially in developing countries. This population was estimated to be about 1.97 billion in 2000, and that number is expected to increase to 3.9 billion in 2030 and up to 5.26 billion in 2050. Although Montgomery focuses on poor countries, this is a concept that can be applied worldwide. Now, with an increase in urban population and urban development, that leads to an increase in carbon dioxide emissions. Right now, there's an annual increase of 3 billion tons of emissions entering the atmosphere, and these emissions have been linked with climate change, which further impacts the species' environment and their habitats. Now, an example of this is giant pandas. Pandas' habitats are constantly being destroyed in China. This is because of continuous development of infrastructure in the country, which further fragments the forest and further destroys their habitats. The consequences associated with this is that panda populations are often isolated from each other, which prevents them from mating. It also dramatically reduces the bamboo they need to survive. Now, habitat loss is a prominent threat that wildlife encounters every day, and zoos may be a way to solve this problem. Zoos are now conservation organizations that are further strengthening their commitment to preserving wildlife and preserving their habitats. However, what often happens when zoos replicate a species' habitat is that the natural aspect of the habitat is diminished, and this often prohibits animals from performing their natural behaviors as they would in the wild. Examples of this are migration, avoiding humans as they would in the wild, mating behaviors, and hunting. Now, as with any problem, there are some solutions. The first one is not only working towards rehabilitating the species within the zoos, but further working towards preserving the natural habitats and the species within them. An example of this is biologists from the San Diego Zoo have been managing one of the few remaining undisturbed coastal beaches in the San Diego Bay, with the purpose of preserving nesting sites for many endangered species that live in the area. For benefits for the solution, it eliminates the need to replicate the habitats, because instead of having to have the animals in the zoos, they're bettering the environment and allowing the animals to live freely in their natural habitat. For drawbacks, it may not work worldwide. Although it might be working for those biologists in San Diego, it does not necessarily mean it will work anywhere else, and there could also be very high costs associated with the solution. The next solution is for zoos to have certain requirements that need to be met. An example for this deals with elephants. Elephants thrive when they have social connections and when they're able to gather their own food. When these factors aren't present, they have impaired mental states, and they may not be able to carry out basic functions in their lives. Due to this, the AZA actually approved rules in 2011 that state that any accredited zoo with elephants has to have at least 3 of the species and a full-time elephant scientist on staff. For benefits, this would improve the animal's mental state, allowing them to carry out those basic functions. It would also add credibility to the zoo officials and add to the validity of the situation as a whole. However, it may not be enforced. There's no say as to whether or not the zoo officials will follow through with these requirements or if the zoos will meet these requirements in general. It also may not necessarily change much. Now, as Margaret Thatcher says, we are not the lords. We are the Lord's creatures, the trustees of his planet, charged today with preserving life itself, preserving life with its mystery and all its wonder. With this being said, we must do whatever we can to protect these endangered species before they become extinct, and zoos can help us do that. Thank you, and here are my works cited.
Stephanie, how did you handle the differing perspectives in order to reach a conclusion?
So with my topic, there are obviously 2 very different sides to it. I looked into a lot the AZA website, which obviously supports using zoos and conserving the species. And then I also looked at PETA, which is the Peoples for Ethical Treatment of Animals, and they say the complete opposite. And so I kind of had to learn to balance both of them, but I ended up deciding that although there are negative things that can happen within zoos, they're necessary to protect the species from extinction.
If you had more time, what additional research would you conduct related to this issue?
If I had more time, I think I would definitely also look into the aquarium side of it, because the AZA, again, is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, but I didn't have time for that. And I also would maybe try and find more statistics on like how many animals are actually being saved from zoos or not.